I want to make a video about pulling a steering wheel off of a 2006 Chevy Impala here, and as you can see, I've pulled the steering wheel off. I'm stripping the interior out of this vehicle completely, and dashboard, everything, it's all coming out. So steering wheel's got to come out, steering column, the entire thing's got to come out. So the first thing you have to do is get the steering wheel out, and just as a side note, be very careful not to rotate the steering wheel, not to over rotate it, not to lose your place on the clock spring here, because you're going to ruin that if you do. And with this particular vehicle, because everything's stripped out, so as you can see, the steering shaft is right down there hanging free, so you could, if you weren't paying attention, you could twirl that steering wheel around and really lose your place. So you have to be mindful of that. And so no, I kept that steering wheel at top dead center and never budged it. But anyway, the issue here getting the steering wheel off is how are you going to pull this thing? And you know, I've seen guys who just grab a hold of the thing and yanked it off with their hands. Well, I tried that. This one wasn't going to go. Okay, other guys, as far as I'm concerned, if you did that, if you grabbed a hold of it and just wiggled and yanked and it popped off, well, you got lucky. I was trying that, and I was about ready to bend the wheel. I was about ready to damage it. Wasn't coming off. Needed to be pulled, and they're made to be pulled. If you pull it off with your hands, you got lucky. Well, anyway, I've got steering wheel pullers, and the thing is, like on my 2002 truck, it uses threaded holes. And I've got pullers that use bolts, and you thread a couple of bolts in there. Well, this does not use threaded holes. You need a jawed puller. Well, I got a whole drawer full of assortments, you know, and I cobbled something together with jaws that are thin enough to get in there. And as you can see, I broke one of them. So these jaws were thin enough to get in there, but they couldn't handle the force. Okay, so that gives you some idea how much force it took to move this steering wheel. It wasn't going to move with my hands. It broke a puller that I cobbled together, and what I did was that original puller, I grabbed it internally here, and you can see the mark. Okay, you can see the marks on both sides. I grabbed it with the jaws facing inward, and as you can see, you've got a choice here. You can have the jaws facing inward or outward. Well, you can see the marks that it left in there. Okay, what I'm getting across here is there was a considerable amount of force involved. The steering wheel did not budge. It broke the puller, okay? So this thing wasn't coming off by hand, okay? Other guys got lucky. Grab a hold of them, wiggle, yank hard, and pops off. Well, you got lucky. This one wasn't coming off for me. This steering wheel has never been off. I am the original owner of this vehicle, so this steering wheel has never been disturbed. Another thing I've seen in other guys, they talk about how be careful not to lose your place with the splines. Okay, that's not necessary, and the reason why is there is a master spline. You see that really wide spline on top. There's a master spline, and there is a master spline that corresponds on the internal splines on the steering wheel. So you don't have to worry about that. And as you can see, I have already removed the snap ring that secures the clock spring, and that's going to come out after I get this outer trim off, and I have to slip this clock spring off and put it somewhere where it won't get disturbed, and that way it will not lose its place. It's at top dead center right now, so you don't have to worry about keeping the splines in keeping track of that, but you got to keep track of your clock spring. And anyways, so I needed some kind of a puller that had jaws. So I found this thing here. This is what I want to talk about. I found this steering wheel remover set. The brand is Performance Tool, and this brand is this item is carried at my local O'Reilly Auto Parts, and the price is $18.99. So you can't go wrong. I went down there. They've got it on the shelf. There's the item number, W80651. So anyway, it's got jaws, okay, which is what you need. The thing is, though, they aren't going to fit in there out of the box. Now, and if you look at they give you a listing of vehicle applications, and in the Chevrolet, they do not list any Impalas. Okay, so anyway, what I ended up doing, I took these jaws, and they were just a little bit too thick to get into the slots. So I'm having a hard time getting good focus on it. But what I had to do was, will it focus? I took it to a bench grinder and just slimmed it down on the ends. And you don't have to slim it down much. Okay, you slim it down just a little bit. And I didn't remove so much metal that it weakened the jaws. The jaws are still plenty strong enough. And you have to slim it down. And then you can slip it in there. And then once you've slipped it in there, you have to slip it in there facing vertically, and then you're going to rotate it. And what I did was, it seemed to fit better with the jaw rotated to the outside. So that's how I pulled it. And you can see it left a little bit of mark. Okay, so some force had to be applied. And so that's what I did. A little bit of slimming down on the end on a bench grinder on both of these jaws, and here's what you get with it. You get you get your puller, and the thing it does not have a point on the end of it. So what I did was I took that to a bench grinder too. Let me see if I can get this to focus. Okay, and I put just a little bit of a chamfer, just by hand, and what that does is it gives it some centering here, because you've got a little bit of a bore, and this isn't really going to fit in there, but with that little bit of a chamfer, that gives you just enough, and it centers itself. And I put some grease on there so it can turn and slide, and it would be nice if it had a swiveling point on it, but you don't get that. What you do get, you get these two pieces here, and they slip on the end of this, and they're, I don't know, they wiggle around, and I guess, I'm not sure what applications use these, but you get those there in case you need them, and these are absolutely no use to me on this vehicle. But with this here, and slip the two jaws in there, and you have your jaws in there, and they can turn, and then they've got a square. So once you get them where you want them, you push that square in there, and then that keeps them from turning. And like I said, I use them with the jaws facing outward. That seemed to be the best fit. Put some grease on the threads, and then by the time I ran this down there too, there was only, by the time I got it in pulling position, there was only about 3 or 4 threads left down there, but that was enough. That's all it needed, because basically what happens is you just apply force until it pops, and then when it pops, that's it. It's off. So it isn't like you don't have to have travel, okay? As long as you've got a couple of threads, and there you go. Pop that thing right off of there. Popped it loose, came off. So, I use an impact. That makes it easy for me, and that way I don't have to. You don't have to brace the steering wheel or whatever. And being the vehicle is stripped, the steering wheel can just spin, and so I can just hold the steering wheel, and you take off the nut with an impact too. This nut is not really tight. It doesn't need a ton of torque. I think I don't know, I'd have to look it up again. I think the torque spec for this is like 26 foot-pounds or something like that. It doesn't need a ton of torque. You do not have to tighten the living daylights out of it. You do have to torque it, so it won't come loose. But the impact just zips that right off of there with no resistance at all. You use the impact to turn the puller, and it puts some tension and some stress on it, and you keep going. You have to be careful. You have to hold it, okay? You have to support it with your hand and hold it, because it's going to want to rock sideways. You have to keep it plumb and apply force, but eventually as the tension builds up, and it just pop and comes right off, and there you go. It's not broken, and it's not damaged. Pops right off. So if you run into this problem, what I'm telling you is you can just run down to your local O'Reilly, $18.99. this item will get it off for you if you you take a grinder, and you don't have to slim these down a lot either. And if you don't have a grinder, a file, whatever, clamp it up in a vise, file it. I didn't remove a lot of metal. They were almost going to go in there, but not quite. And I just had to slim them down a little bit on the very end. So don't go overboard. And of course, once you do that, you're not going to return the tool. You own it. But there you go. I mean, you're not risking that much anyways, and it worked. So that might work for you if you run into this situation. Okay, thanks a lot. So long.